Um, I'm not giving credit to some dude who works one day a year and breaks in and enters to people's houses all over the world in one night. And my dad was also a scientist, so he was like, it's physically impossible for him to actually.
What a killjoy!
Where's the magic, Dad? Jeez.
No, I mean I've heard there's a bit of kerfluffle I don't know a year and a half ago with Fox News and Black Santa, but I guess I've intellectually known for a long time that in black households, I mean, Santa looks like us. But what the thing that I found funny is I've never seen a picture of him. I've never seen a picture of Black Santa.
Really? Oh, yeah, there's plenty of Black Santas.
Okay,
but,
all right.
I mean, here's the thing, like, people in America make that, like, a super racist thing that black people do it. Or they make a big deal about Kwanzaa. They're like, can't you just frickin' celebrate Christmas? But the fact of the matter, and we'll get to this at Christmas, but the fact of the matter is Santa Claus looks different the world over.
Yeah.
Like, you go to Asia, if people do celebrate Christmas in Asia, because most people don't, but if you go to, like, China, and there's a Chinese Santa. If you go to Sweden, there's a Swedish, I mean, he's, of course, white, but the Swedish Santa looks distinctly different than the American version of him.
They have a collection of all of them.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's...
Father Christmas and Père Noel, they all have the long beard in common, but their clothes are all different.
And because we're all sleeping when he arrives, no one will ever really know.
Santa, Tim Allen is Santa. He is
yes.
That's what I picture.
But people would be upset. People would honestly be upset if there were a movie where Santa came out and he was black. Just like people are like people were up in arms that this black kid is playing Johnny Storm in the new Fantastic Four movie. They're like, no, Fantastic Four, all of them are white. And then the black guy in Thor, people were upset that
Idris Elba.
Yeah, Idris Elba played Heimdall.
All right. Hey, guys.
But either way,
let's get this going.
That's another thing entirely.
Wow.
So Kara. Oh, no. We're doing our stories first.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we're doing our stories first. So I think I'm going to go first this time.
Go for it.
Okay, so in Penzance, is Penzance in Italy? Penzance is in Italy, right? I think. Pirates of Penzance?
Pirates yeah. That's all I know.
Okay, well, that's where I'm going with it anyway. They had the pirate world record flop that cost £56,000, which was 3 times the agreed upon budget. But either way, in Penzance, they tried to break the world record of people dressed. My hats off goes to Penzance. I'll just start over again. My hats off goes to Penzance. The town of Penzance. Most of you may know Penzance from the Pirates of Penzance, and that's what this is related to. But they tried to break the world record of most people in one place dressed as a pirate, and they fell short. They fell short.
That's going to be my reaction to pretty much any of these ridiculous world records.
All right, so it cost the taxpayers £56,000. I don't know how much that translates to in American money.
It's like $2.50 per pound.
Using British, it's like $1.80 if it's the British pound.
Okay. So either way,
all right, I don't know.
$56,000, which was 3 times the agreed upon budget, and they missed out on securing the record by 77 people.
Oh, fail!
So,
major fail.
Not only did they not break the world record, they went overboard on the budget. 3 times the agreed about budget. And Mayor David Nesbisnick
say that 3 times.
I know I did not pronounce that correctly. Said it was that just lets you know how much I care about how much his last name is spelled, or how his last name is spelled. But said it was a sorry business, and added, if only all the people enjoying themselves in the pub nearby had joined in, we would have broken it. It does make it a bitter pill to swallow, and makes it seem even more of a waste of money.
Wait, so the mayor is blaming their loss on the drunken people next door?
People in the bar. If the people in the bar had just manned up or pirated up and shown up,
What did they spend that budget on? Like they could have just had beer out in the town square and
That's
everyone.
what they needed to do. Everybody would have shown up. Like
everybody would have shown up. So
from what I know about
like-
pirates, those drunk people in the pub are part of the set decoration. You can't complain that they're not participating.
Good point. Good point.
Here's the thing, though. Councillor Nesbisnik, he became
Just one more time, people.
he
That's all we
became
need.
mayor of Penzance 12 days before the failed record attempt. So,
What a legacy.
so he's not taking any responsibility. He said all the commitments and expenditure had been agreed several months previously. So he's like, I'm not taking no credit for this failed
Oh,
attempt.
wow.
I want you to
So-
know before we go to the next
was
one.
all
I
the
want
fun
you to
people.
know that I've spent the last 3 minutes trying to figure out how to work the sound "r" into a joke. Can't do it. I got nothing.
Are you sure?
Oh!
Boom.
Are they
Great.
gonna try again?
I was gonna say the mayor was sorry, but
I like that one. It's the worst. It's the worst. I like it the best.
Oh yeah. Well, anyway, so yeah, hats off to Penzance for
Nice.
trying to break the record of most pirates gathered in one place, but unfortunately, they did not, and they wasted all that money and time.
Okay.
Yes. So that's my hats off this week.
All right. I'm not quite sure who to take my hat off to in the story, but it is so shocking that it is funny, but not really at all. Okay, this happened in Michigan, in Otsego, so not far from where I live. This family, mom and dad, they have 6 kids. They have a house, but they just bought this property, and they decided they wanted to let their kids spend some time outdoors for the summer. So they got 3 big tents and set them up in their property here. And they had, like a kerosene lamp, a kerosene stove. They had some big jugs of water they got from Walmart. And they were camping out. Their plan was to camp out all summer long. And apparently, one of the neighbors called CPS on them. And CPS came and took all 6 of their kids away because they were in unfit living conditions. Let me see all the reasons they have here. They had, let's see. It was an unstable living condition. The family had no electricity or water source and only had kerosene for heat.
So are we hats offing to CPS here? Because that seems like a win.
Yeah. Yeah. And because the youngest child had a diaper rash.
Ooh.
And so I guess, I don't know, maybe this isn't as shocking to you guys as it is to me, but I'm like, what? Like, they were camping? CPS came because they were camping? Like, since when was electricity a requirement to take care of your children?
Oh, wait, okay, so I missed that part. They're camping.
Yes.
They're camping.
Hi, honey. You didn't
Oh,
get that?
I missed the part about them camping. I was like,
They
this
wanted
seems
their
like a
kids
win
to
for
spend-
CPS to come in and do that.
No, they're camping. They're out camping their property, and they thought we want to live off the grid for the summer, let our kids be outside, enjoy nature. I think the youngest one was 2, and the oldest one was 17.
Going into every Amish home?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be raiding
That's what I would like
campgrounds, climbing in your windows,
Okay,
Snatching your people up.
snatching
You
people
know,
up.
no, I gotta say, like, that neighbor is just,
I'm sorry, that joke about climbing your window, snatching your people up is going to live on forever.
And like
I
forever,
think
I
people-
use it all the time. I don't know.
1,000 years from now, people will still be saying that.
Hide your kids, hide your wife.
oh,
But yeah, so I mean, I guess hats off to the neighbor. But here's the thing: is like I was reading some of the comments on this story, and like people were like, and then this is sad, but people were like, I lived with my mother in a crack den, and we were regularly abused, and CPS was called on us multiple times. But yet I stayed with my parents, and they just got my mother in programs. And yet these parents, they weren't given they had a house. If they said, hey, we don't really like you having your kids out here, well, just take them on home. Like, that could have been a great option. But they didn't
like
even...
a warning, maybe. Like, hey, you know what? We're getting...
People are concerned about you out here. Maybe you should be out here in the elements. And they ended up actually... CPS had their kids for like 3 weeks. A lawyer was able to get them back because... the woman is part Native American, and they were able to kind of claim like some kind of
cultural thing.
Yeah, like I mean, yeah, I think
Wow.
kind of. Basically, it's a lot harder for the government to impose on natives, on Native
I
Americans.
feel like this is so sad though. Like I mean, I
There seems like there has to be
literally-
something more to that story.
Yeah,
It's
like-
gotta be.
Well, the key thing, why the neighbor called, is because the parents went to the laundromat to go do their laundry and left the 15-year-old in charge. So
But they're
15-year-old in charge,
legally
a
allowed to do
4-year-old, a
that.
2-year-old, I think an 8-year-old, and then the oldest one is 17, but she has cerebral palsy, so I guess she's not capable of caring for the kids. But like, a lot of people in these comments were saying things like, yeah, well, that's the problem. They should have an adult there. They left them unsupervised.
The interesting thing is, in Michigan, there's actually no agreed upon age where a child can be left alone.
Honestly, I started
actually
babysitting when I
looked
was
at that one
11.
time.
I babysat my 1-year-old brother when I was 11. I remember because I was so excited. I'm 11. I can babysit now. So I feel like 15 is.
So,
You
so,
have to get a babysitting license.
so Kara,
so
I
there
gotta.
has to be.
Who are we hats offing to here? Like,
I'm gonna say hats off
To the
to
lawyer.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hats off
Who got their
to the
kids back.
lawyer who found the loophole to get her kids back, because otherwise CPS would still have them.
wait,
And,
wait. Were they actually Native American, or were they just bronzing their skin to look Native?
uh-huh.
Well,
Oh,
let me
identifies with Native American culture.
let me chime in here because I think of all of us, I am 1/64th Native American, and
Hold on. Last week you said you were 1/64th black.
He's
So
got both. He's got both.
I want to know all the 64s.
actually, no, I just
Run that
made that up. It just seemed funny. That's an Easter egg for faithful listeners.
Oh, that's great. But yeah, that's so weird. That's so weird.
That
So
is.
yeah, hats off to the lawyer for
Wow.
finding that legal loophole.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there are worse cases where, like, the comments where they were, they were called and they weren't taken. Like, I feel like there's cases all the time where they're not extreme enough. And
Yeah.
then it's like, why on the random one time they've ever been called that you get, like, super
Wait,
extreme?
Kara,
Like, do they have an agenda, something to point out? I don't know.
Kara, aren't you going camping next week?
Yeah, well, I'm going to summer camp, so hopefully they don't come raid that. because
Yeah.
I have my
I'm
son.
standing by to call CPS on your butt.
I say we will have one light bulb in
And
our
we're going to go
cabin,
to
so-
every Amish community.
And I'm gonna release a bunch of
and-
snakes at your campground.
Right,
Oh,
it's-
Giant
please,
snakes.
Iowa snakes. I almost picked an Iowa-based story tonight, but decided
Oh,
I'd
it's so
try
funny.
other states.
No, but
Lay
we
off
also
of
need to go
Iowa.
to every Amish community and say they don't have electricity.
They don't have electricity. Let's
Yeah.
put them all in
Let's
jail.
Because otherwise you're
Like-
discriminating,
Are
right?
there any black Amish people? Are there any Amish people pretending to be black?
Oh my
Mm,
I
gosh.
don't know.
Kara, is it Camp Silver Lake that you're going to? Because that's
No.
what I think of whenever I hear.
Let's not broadcast where she's going.
Oh yeah, he's trying to go back too.
TPS.com.
He's trying to go back too for a couple weeks
Oh,
ago.
the snake thing?
No, Camp Silver Lake. It's Jason and the mom who died. a few weeks ago, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Arr,
No, okay,
stole
so now I'm
your
afraid
joke
of
'cause I'm a
snakes
pirate.
and psycho killers. Great. And CPS. I got 3 things to worry about.
Yes, like, be
Yeah,
called.
I got
CPS.
99 problems.
Okay, so Kara picked tonight's topic, and we want to do it quickly enough so that Kent can get. We want to do this in the next 15 minutes so that Kent can get to his
We got this.
party thing. So, Kara, explain kind of this topic real quick.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's not a new topic by any means, but I was there's a song I really love by Derek Webb called "The Church," and so I was kind of looking for a video of it or something to show in a class I'm teaching, and I found this cool video of Derek Webb before he sang "The Church," and the song "The Church," just in summary, you can look it up, but it's about just that. If you love God, you have to love the church. There's no separation. There's no, well, I guess I'll be nice to you. The church is his bride. If you love the groom, you're gonna love the bride. And anyway, so he was saying beforehand, he made a point about churches that have different separate services. Like they have a 9 a.m. traditional service, and then they might have an 11 o'clock contemporary service because they have people in the congregation that want different styles of music, or perhaps have different viewpoints on instruments or women speaking or hand clapping, any number of things. And so rather than meeting in one service and just everybody kind of compromising, they accommodate everybody by having 2 separate services. Now, that's something that's pretty normal to me. Like I grew up with churches doing that a lot, and it seemed like a fair compromise. But he actually made a point that if you have a preacher or an elder that's encouraging you to have separate services, then you need to talk to them because they're doing something wrong. And that was the first time I'd ever really heard someone talk like that. That maybe it wasn't a compromise to have separate services, but rather it was a separation of something that wasn't meant to be separated. So what do you guys think?
Derek Webb.
I know.
Derek.
Please say it for me.
Derek Webb, who I have been familiar with now for 18 years, since his, I believe it's 18 years, since the band he was a part of, Caedmon's Call, released their first album. Derek Webb is a really good musician and a really good songwriter. And I've always thought he was kind of a jerk. And I can't tell you exactly why I thought that, but there was three really important people in that sounds wrong. There were three creative forces in Caedmon's Call. There was Cliff and Danielle Young, who was a married couple, who were the lead vocals along with Derek. And Cliff and Danielle seemed to be really nice. And I was constantly hearing stories about behind the scenes, what's the word? Friction, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And it always seemed to go back to the part that Derek Webb is hard to work with. There's nothing in this video that I saw necessarily that makes me think, oh, that's wrong. But there's nothing in this video that dissuades me of that previous the previous thought that I had about him. He seems what's the word I'm looking for? Derek Webb seems to think that he knows the way things should be. I don't know that, and he has never not come across that way to me.
Yeah, I think here's the thing, and I want to address what he said in the video. So I don't want this to be a bash Derek Webb kind of podcast.
Good,
but
because I like Derek Webb.
I mean,
Sure.
Here's the thing. I kind of do agree with you. He kind of brings a lot of this on himself. But I found that Derek Webb, over the years, has been very, very contrarian.
Yes.
And by contrarian, I mean the church, like the church universal, generally says black, and Derek Webb tends to say white.
Yep. And
so that's kind of so when I'm thinking about what he's saying, I'm thinking, one, consider the source, but because of what we do in the podcast, the nature of this podcast, that we also, have people, we often disagree with each other and things like that. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. I do believe that a broken clock can be right twice a day. So let me engage what he said in the video. If you're listening to the podcast, you already heard it because we actually played back, or I edited in the sound from it. But the fact of the matter is, Derek Webb is, I'm going to say that he's not right on this, and here's why. And it's not a perspective I haven't thought about. The fact of the matter is, if Derek Webb is right in what he said, then every single missionary endeavor is incorrect in what it does. By adopting the culture around it, not watering down the gospel, there are lots of people who leave from the United States and they go over to a nation in Africa. Right, a country in Africa, and or a country in Europe, and they learn about that culture. They learn how people respond differently to certain things, certain words not to use, certain ways that Scripture in English might be confusing to those listeners. So they adopt the language of the people around them. And the fact of the matter is, I love what he says about. Hey, you know what, if you're kind of looking at church as like a consumer thing, what does this do for me? He's right. But the whole thing about, there is something to be said about a culture that someone comes from. If someone comes from a culture of rock and roll, the fact of the matter is that, the traditional service is not going to necessarily appeal to the person who's from the rock and roll culture, or the person who's from the hymns culture is not going to necessarily appeal, really like to go to a church that has the, the more rock and roll culture. And so I think there is something to be said about, the church doesn't need to be about me, but I really do feel like a church that says, hey, you know what, there are people who are from this particular culture So we understand that to reach that particular culture, we need to speak that particular culture's language, and that particular culture's language is hymns. So we're going to sing hymns. Or this culture does rock and roll, so we're going to do rock and roll. Specifically, we're really talking about worship here, styles of worship, I think, at this point. And so I get what he's saying. I get what he's getting at. I take it with a grain of salt, one, because it's Derek Webb. I'm considering the source. But by engaging it, I do want to say that I think that he's wrong because it discounts or calls into question any type of missionary endeavor that says, let us try and attempt to understand the culture that we are speaking into.
I just want to kind of jump on the back of that too as well and say I also think that if what he says were to happen, in churches across, it switches kind of the whole precedence of the church. It brings it back to the time in which the church said, you know what, we have our big, strong ivory towers, and you come to us, and we're not trying to engage you on how you were. It was very religious, right? And I'm not saying there are still churches who try to stick to, for their belief's sake, things that are very traditional in a certain way, and people adhere to that. And I'm not trying to down that, right? But it gets away from the Jesus loves you where you are, come as you are mentality as well, that I also think is relevant, because if we're honest, like you said, that rock and roll person, you know what, God wants to reach them. And who am I to judge exactly where and how God does choose to reach them? And if he's going to reach them through a way that maybe doesn't appeal to me, I just want him to be reached. And I think that the broader mission of this downplays, I guess, the broader mission of the church. And I think you're very right on about the whole missionary thing. You cannot take a church from America or England and plant it over in Africa and expect it to just work. It doesn't work like that. Neither could you take the church from Africa and plant it here. And I think that we do have to look at our culture. And I also think that our God is big enough as well to look at our culture. He loves all of us in our cultures, and he created us to be diversified and different. And I think to simplify and say that he's not in it is making God far too small.
I think that's what he's saying. I mean, maybe I got something different out of it than you guys did, but I feel like that's what he's saying is like we all have such diversity we bring to the table, and a lot of times we've answered that diversity by having separate services to accommodate each diverse group. So if you like rock and roll, you go here, and if you like hymns, you go here, and if you like piano music, you go here. And he's saying instead, why don't you all worship together? And because he said, if you're doing worship right, you should dislike every third song. So
right.
Basically, he's saying it's not all your style. Some of it is your style. I think it's a different thing. Well, let me say two things. One, it's okay to have different styles of worship. Like, I totally think that. I don't think it's, like, we have a lot of churches, and I think it's great, like, that, if you are, like, really conservative, like, I've kind of grown up singing a cappella music. I go to a church that sings a cappella music. I love it. That's my preference, and it's a good community of people. I personally don't have an issue with instruments, and I'm cool going to any other church and any other kind of worship. I know there are people that are not okay with interacting with people that have different worship styles, and I think that's where the problem is. The problem isn't just like, it's okay you have different styles. I think it's saying, well, my style is the only way that I am comfortable worshiping, so this is what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to accommodate you. If you want to do that, you go somewhere else.
And you know what, that attitude of my way is the only way, that's wrong. And the attitude that it's all about consumerism, there's some points there that are valid as well. I think if he was addressing a congregation who was struggling with those issues, that maybe that would be a maybe more valid point. I think the problem is that to say that as a whole is not broad enough for God and his worship. And I also think that worship is a very important aspect, to try to dumb it down to where, we're all just going to kind of, compromise. And compromise, I'm not downplaying compromise, but none of you have to really be extremely reached here or touched here in this service. You just like every third song, I think misses the point of worship. We enter into his gates with praise, and it isn't about us. It really is about connecting to him, but it is about us reaching him. It's about us breaking through the chaos and the busyness and the confusion or the mess of whatever we're going through in the muck of our day or our week. When we come into the church doors, we have all that on us, and it's about putting some of that down and breaking through to the throne room and communing with your God and letting him come in and sweep over you and maybe just take away that stress or heal that stress or whatever it is that you need that day. And I think that's where worship needs to be and what it needs to be focused on. Whatever style does that.
Kent?
Yeah, I know it's my turn. I feel like I feel like I'm walking on eggshells here because for faithful listeners who remember since I was introduced on the podcast, I attend and am very active in a church that that follows this very model. I mean, right down to the service times Derek talked about when he said 8:30, and I mean we have 8:30, 10, and 11:30. But in the last 10 years, my church has grown from a weekly attendance of about 3,500 to between 9,000 and 10,000 on a weekly basis, and over 11 campuses and probably 40 services, we have one traditional service, quote unquote traditional service, where they do hymns. And there are about 400 people at the traditional service, and they are incredibly faithful, and they are some of the nicest, most genuine people you will ever meet. And they would be utterly uncomfortable and out of place at any one of the other services that we do, which feature a usually seven piece acoustic electric band and a Broadway style light show. And they wouldn't like it, and I think that would get in the way of their worship.
Right. I think that's the issue I have with
Yes.
Derek Webb on this. Is like, it's like he's communicating it is your Christian duty to be uncomfortable every third song, to hate something. I'm like, if this gets in the way of you experiencing God, and this is and I don't want to downplay the place of worship by any means, but when we're talking about worship wars, I think we're talking about the most basic thing in church. If the sermon is making you uncomfortable, and you leave to go somewhere where they're preaching, a lighter gospel, that's an issue. If you're like, dude, I don't like hymns. I like the smoke machine. I like the fog machine. I like the band, the 12-piece band and the saxophone and all that stuff more than I like, the organ and the hymns. Cool, fine, But if it extends beyond that, that's an issue. I think I could go with Derek Webb if he's suggesting that leads into a more problematic approach towards church as a whole. But I don't see a lot of people approaching church on the whole that way. We went to a church this morning. Jen and I are checking out new churches, and for me, we discussed it after church. What did you think of this? What did you think of that? But at the end of the day, for me, it's like, what are they teaching?
Right.
What are they truly teaching? This style of worship for me today wasn't really amazing. That's not going to be the make or break for me. I want to know, how are they preaching and teaching Christ in their community of faith and outside of their church?
And who
walls.
are they?
Yeah,
Do they
who are
live
these
what they
people?
preach? Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of my thoughts on this kind of thing.
I think he goes too far in saying that if your church has two services or different worship styles, then you're doing it wrong. I mean, I think it's fair to say maybe you need to look at why you're doing that, because you might be doing it wrong, but I wouldn't say you definitely are. Obviously, I would assume for Ken's church that you couldn't logistically have one giant service with everybody there. That would be impossible. You'd have to have multiple services. And if you're doing that, well, why not offer some different options for people, different times, different styles, different music? I think that just makes sense. You're trying to serve your community. And I think there's lots of really good reasons that you might opt to have some multiple services, multiple singing styles.
Right. Well, and I think, too, like, who am I to impose that somebody next to me needs to be uncomfortable every third song as well? I mean, not to be, but if it's literally getting in their way and every, what if they're in a great place of worship and then it's like, oh, there that goes. I think to infringe my taste or somebody else's on me, that also is asking a lot and not exactly Christian, And I also think, hey, we have all these different varieties of things. Even, one size doesn't fit all. Everybody's not the same. You have different cultures even, and sometimes they'll have an English service and a not English service, for people because, what, the grandparents don't speak English, but the grandson does. So you even have other kind of situations like that.
Most Americans would say, you need to learn how to speak American.
Right. I mean, even things like exercise. There's yoga, there's running, there's so many different things. We live in a society where people are different, and they need different things to fit different needs and sometimes just taste.
Right. It's not wrong for the church to cater towards certain affinities.
Right.
But
what's wrong is doctrine.
When the church, when doctrine is catered towards certain affinities, that becomes a major issue. And if Derek Webb had gone down that road, I would have said, I'm with you. But on this, I get where he's going. I think he
meant well.
Yeah, I think he runs afoul of the point he was trying.
He goes too far.
Yeah, he goes too far.
He goes too far. It's a fair point that he goes too far.
And
I mean, for me, maybe this is a much bigger issue than we're ever going to discuss in this podcast. But I mean, just the idea of a church worship service is not a first century church idea. It's something that we do now because our churches are so big. That's how we accommodate people. And so I think it does get tricky because we're trying to set rules based on the Bible, what we do during this time, when it's not really something we have instructions about what to do during this time.
Well, Cal just did a teaching actually on the history of the church. And as the church has evolved, we have to evolve to kind of meet the current society where they are and bring Christ to them.
Right.
And it's going to continue.
I think we can end there.
Okay.
In there. So I know you got to go, Ken. So try to be mindful of that time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good night, everybody.
Just FYI, this is the